Thank you very much. I think that whenever we talk about cryptocurrencies or digital currencies or central banks, we have first to disclaim if we work for a central bank. Do you?
I don't.
We don't, any of us. And have you ever invested in cryptocurrencies?
Well, anecdotally, I have. Probably not as early as I would have liked, probably not as much as I would have liked, but yes, I have.
Okay, I haven't, because I have to recognize that I never fully understood what's going on with cryptocurrencies, so it is not the kind of assets I usually invest in. It seems that cryptocurrencies are not in its best moment, and nobody knows what is coming in the next future. But at least I would say that cryptocurrencies have the virtue of having exposed some of the mistakes made by central banks. So, Luis, I have to say that I'm going to try to be a little bit provocative about my questions to Luis.
Absolutely.
This is more conservative, but this is 3:30 in the afternoon, and time for siesta in Spain, and I guess that you all have had lunch in the last minutes ago, and we need to wake up the conversation. Okay, so are central bank digital money, digital currencies an attempt to compete with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies?
Well, I would say at least that has been the reaction from the part of central banks to a wave that has been coming for some time now. So it all started, we could say, 2008, but it's been really over the past, I would say, 3 years. If I have to place a moment where I think central banks reacted, it was 2019, where Facebook launched their Libra project. That really got central bankers nervous, because all of a sudden you could have a 2-point-something billion use case immediately. And I think that was a moment where actually that triggered a big reaction, both on the regulatory side and at the same time on the so-called CDBCs projects, which currently we have quite a lot of on stage. Yeah.
Right, because I mean, we have to remember maybe that issuing money is a monopoly run by central banks since 100 and some.
Yep.
Indeed, in Spain, the Bank of Spain, the Central Bank of Spain, and the peseta, the currency that most of you have not ever experienced because you are too young, but it was a private currency when it was born in the late 19th century. We heard a lot about China, so now they are probably fighting for their monopoly back, right? With the rising of these cryptocurrencies. We heard a lot about China and how they are developing a digital currency, and also about a potential digital euro. I have two questions regarding this situation, this attempt of central banks to create their own digital currencies. First is why should we emulate China? I mean, in the free world.
Okay, that's a good one. Well, I wouldn't say we're emulating or copying them. There are currently 105 live projects from central banks on digital currencies. They're not following the Chinese model to start with. And I would say the social contract with citizens is not the same everywhere. Currently, we accept already in China that with players like Alipay and WeChat Pay, all those transactions are monitored by the government currently, today. Those are private companies. We couldn't even imagine a situation where private players would share information and public authorities would actually oversee that information with such a control as in China. So we could develop eventually features for digital currencies where not necessarily would have this big brother notion where actually the government would be looking at all transactions. So I wouldn't say we are following the Chinese model on digital currencies overall.
Are you sure about the social contract? Because we come from an age in which in the free world we have accepted any kind of instructions from governments in the middle of the pandemic, including the suppression of fundamental rights. I mean, do you think that we would never accept a precise track of what we do on our transactions from central banks if it finally implement the digital currencies?
Okay, you know what economists say, and I'm an economist, when we need to change our mind? We usually say it's a new paradigm. So I wouldn't rule out the fact that we go into a new paradigm at any point.
Right, and do you have any explanation of why, whenever officials from the European Central Bank support the idea of creating a digital currency, they do it by highlighting the risk of Bitcoin?
Okay, you started by saying that central bankers are prudent people. And I agree. I mean, the role of a central bank, the main mandate has to do with financial stability, with the integrity of financial markets, and that is something that is at the core of a central bank mandate. So it is a very natural process of thinking whenever thinking about a new project, giving the cons immediately and putting the challenges immediately and trying to balance the risk of any measure taking. So I'm not surprised that a central bank, when launching something new, makes a balance and actually weights a lot potential risks being taken when developing these kind of products, and especially with new technologies and things that are not already in production are embedded. So not surprising for me that actually risks are really waiting on just presenting, front loading, and actually even accepting and taking the risk of producing a new wave and shape of money like is digital currencies.
Because you think that we don't take any risk when we invest in fiat money?
Well, we've seen countries actually, and we see now countries that unfortunately have currencies which is not the preferred asset in the country. I'm just thinking about Venezuela. Money might kind of burns in the hands of people. Everyone that can moves into a more stable currency, like could be the dollar, is just an example, but that is something that has happened in countries where there is a problem with the credibility of the authority issuing the money. So that is something that has happened with currencies as well. So it's not ruled out the fact that actually fiat currency could actually have problems of acceptance even on the broad public. Yeah.
Okay, but let us nice to central bankers. Help them to explain the benefits of digital currencies to these audience.
Okay, so yeah, we've been talking a lot about that, and maybe we should have started by the fundamentals, right? What is a digital currency? We live in a world where the representation of money is already digital in many shapes, because we transfer just a note on our bank. The main difference with a digital currency is that we would have a direct noting with our central bank, so that actually the bank issues a digital representation of money the same way it issues a banknote with a reference, it's unique, etc. So this digital money would be a representation on a digital shape, in a token shape, of an asset, from a sovereign asset. And coming to the benefits, I would say that brings immediate transactions, could happen seamlessly. It is a good element, a good feature actually for financial inclusion as well. I would say cross-border payments would be facilitated significantly as well. And maybe even something that we've lived over the past 2 years with COVID-19. Access to individuals would be immediate. So think about a measure being taken, for instance, during the pandemic in COVID-19, where you wanted to give a subsidized to people. You have kind of a processes until the money is withdrawn to people. So with a digital currency, you could have a direct flow of money to targeted beneficiaries immediately. So I would say all those features are among the main elements that would make for a big change in terms of a digital representation of money issued by a sovereign authority.
And what about the risk?
Okay, yeah, we're talking about central bankers. We should also think about the risk. I think we have to consider several important challenges. And some of them have to do basically with the monetary policy and with how the transmission of monetary policy changes. We live in a context where fiduciary money is in the hands of commercial banks, and they share it between citizens with an interest rate bearing on lending. That is the transmission mechanism. The moment we see the ECB, for instance, changing interest rates, it is the role of commercial banks to transmit these changes in the price of money to citizens. That is the way monetary policy has been working since we know it. Now, this transmission mechanism would change.
Well, since Bretton Woods, fundamentally.
Okay, I accepted. Yeah, well, in the past, probably in the world, all in this room we know, right? But absolutely.
They were not born.
But definitely that's something that might change. The moment you have a direct representation of money of the central bank, there's a big challenge on how you define the technical characteristics of that, because that would make for differences in the transmission mechanism of monetary policy. And that is one very important challenge. And the other one is what role remains for commercial banks? And that is another big question mark. This is a financial disintermediary in our societies that we cannot just avoid and we cannot just get rid of. It's an important role that they play. And there is a need to actually see how, partly by issuing a digital currency to commercial banks and then distribute and different technical means, we need to preserve that role. And that is a technical feature with a high complexity that brings big challenges on board.
A lot of challenges.
Have I persuaded you of any of those?
I don't know. It's challenging. I mean, I like to think about the transmission mechanisms of monetary policy. That I guess that it would be possible, and I'm sure that whenever they design from central banks, which other role is precisely to guarantee the solvency of the banking system, they will make sure that commercial banks take their piece of the cake somehow.
Yeah.
And the way to do it is facilitating them, and making them be part of the policy making, monetary policy making.
Yeah.
So, Luis, I mean, you're younger than me, but we both studied economy many years ago, and we were taught that there are two key fundamental things, in policy making. One of them is that inflation is basically, fundamentally, a monetary phenomenon. And the other one is the importance of antitrust policies. How important is competition, not only to keep prices, in a pace of growth, moderate pace of growth, but also to foster competitiveness and innovation. And we seem to have forgotten these two fundamental principles in the last years. And these principles have been important for macroeconomic policies and stability, macroeconomic stability in the last 40 years, and also for this amazing explosion of innovation that has taken place in the last 4 decades. So now we see that central banks a couple of years ago forgot that there is a relationship between the size of their balance sheets and inflation, yep. Sooner or later, right? And we have allowed growing to the infinite to certain companies that now have certainly made monopolies in many industries. Do you think that in the design of these digital currencies issued by central banks, do you think that they would be willing to correct some of the mistakes they have made and to publish an algorithm and to communicate a constant pace of growth of money so people can have an idea of how to keep the value of their money?
Oh, that's
Are
going
they going
way far.
to give up the machine of printing money?
Okay, that's a very challenging question. I don't think so. I don't think they're ready for that.
I don't think either.
I don't think they're ready for that. And I don't think they should do that either, because one of the things that we have seen in the last few years is that black swans exist, and that we cannot forecast everything. Part of the price increases, we live in a current big wave of inflation. It's a monetary phenomenon, but would we have foreseen the problems strangling the world logistics happening now, the war in Ukraine, as factors triggering price increases in several markets? I mean, if you had just a rule that we have to abide to in terms of growth of money, we could definitely not be easily facing shocks of this sort, increases in oil prices. So I don't think we can define just an automatic rule, self-enforcement or contract, a smart contract that allows for the growth of mass of money in circulation with the rule without just incorporating complex things that happen in the economy. So I think they're far from ready, and I really myself have really strong problems on thinking that we can and should do that.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to keep trying to put you in trouble with the one last question, right? So, I mean, the fall of empires, if you look at history, occurs always when they give up the value of their monetary systems, and we have witnessed how the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve seem to feel very comfortable with the massive deterioration of the purchasing power of their citizens, the ones they have protected from inflation. And at the same time, we see Putin fixing the price of the ruble to the gold. And what do you think about that, and what could be the consequences in the medium and the long term?
Of fixing the value of the...
Yeah, and the two sides of the coin. And I'm feeling comfortable with the massive deterioration of the purchasing power.
Yeah, I feel we have a big problem of inequality indeed, exiting from the current global situation, where actually we're seeing definitely a loss of purchasing power, especially damaging a certain basket of population. And I feel that's a big challenge, that of course governments should just not stay on the comfort of, okay, we exited from COVID with very high debt, and the real value of my debt goes down as I accept inflation. Well, we've exited in that way from all worse.
Is that the trade-off?
Well, and that's something
I mean,
that I don't feel too comfortable with that, but I feel that's partly a balance we are going to be living for a while with a higher acceptance to inflation. That is something I feel that's going to be coming. Coming to price intervention, even if it's a currency price intervention, I think in the end it only brings problems. So this linking to other asset of currencies, I feel in the end markets are quite smart, and it will just create an imbalance that one way or another sometime will come to reality, and that's something that...
I mean, to clarify what Luis just has said, right? You know how the dynamics of the ratio public debt GDP works. I mean, it depends basically on two things: nominal GDP and real interest rates. So if you have a huge nominal GDP, not because you are growing like crazy, but because inflation, and you have negative interest rates, then the public debt, tends to come down, the ratio, public debt and GDP. But they have the mandate of fighting inflation, not reducing that ratio. And still they prefer to help governments than protect citizens from massive deterioration of the value of their money. Well, that's scary, isn't it? Okay, we have one more second for one question. Whoever of you likes to ask something. Yes, you told me 45 minutes and then you change it suddenly, and reduce it to 20. So I have the right to one more question. Coming from there, right.
Hi, everyone. I'm really interested about what you said, how CBDCs can support forcibly displaced people, refugees. So really interested in your thoughts about how this can help us around financial inclusion, financial and health. Thanks so much.
Okay. One more?
Can you do it in 30 seconds?
Yes. One more? Right there. Right.
Yes, one thing that's possible with these that you can't do with normal fiat is that you can. I was reading an article in I think it was a British newspaper talking about the benefits of CBDCs and that you could potentially stop an alcoholic from using his money at a liquor store, for example. So I mean, it's kind of referring back to the China model, I guess. In light of that, why would anyone hold CBDCs versus Bitcoin or something else?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Well, I'm really sorry,
That's a
but
very good question.
we're
Come on.
over time already.
I don't know what's coming next, but that deserves an answer.
Okay, just one second question. Financial inclusion it is bringing the opportunity to people to hold money directly with the central bank, and that is allowing in great parts of the world for financial inclusion. The other question, although I could skip it because of time, just one headline. I feel really we're not on a big brother society in that sense. Of course, I think we can even develop features that allow for anonymity on CDBC. So I don't think we're going to go for that model in most parts of the world. So thank you very much.
A big
you
hand
very
for
much.
Luis, please.